All right, so let's go back and get started by creating our form in the body of our document. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here inside the body, and below the H1 somewhere, I'm going to create a form tag. That's the first thing you need to do. And your form tag is going to have several different things that go inside of it. One is that I usually give a form tag an ID. And the reason for that, there are potentially different reasons, but a big reason is because with an ID, you can style the form intentionally different than maybe some other particular form. Another thing that you can do is because a form is going to be unique in its location and in terms of layout, it's only going to exist in one place. It doesn't mean that you can't have multiple forms on the same page, but each form is going to be different. And so in that case, you do need IDs, especially if you want to be able to navigate to them by using anchor links to jump to them. So I'll give this form an ID of volunteer, like that, okay? Another thing that it needs to have is it needs to have a method, all right? And you see here that it's prompting me between two different method options, get and post. We're going to choose post. You can use either one, but the way that these methods work is a little bit different. So post will send stuff to another page, or it sends it basically to an action. It'll send it somewhere, right? It'll perform an action, which I'll show you in just a second what we're going to do with that. But whenever you do something to post, it'll post to a new page, whereas get, it will take all of the user data that was input and it will put it up into the resulting page's URL. So, and you've seen this happen where you click on something and you get some long, crazy URL string up in the address field of your browser, and that's because it's using the get method. And there are different reasons that you would use both, but for now we're just going to stick to post, and I'm not going to go deeply into why you would use each one. That would be something that you would get into more whenever you actually get to something that's a little bit more advanced than a scripting language. The other thing that you need to have is an action. And the action is basically what the form is going to do. You know, what is the form going to execute whenever you hit that submit button? And what we're going to have it do in this class is we're going to have it go to this form, and whenever it goes to a form somewhere, excuse me, I shouldn't say form, it goes to a script. So this is a script that I've written, this 125-form.php. It's a dynamic script that will process that data that is in the form. It'll actually do something with it, and it outputs it for you to see on screen, like in the previous video where I showed you an example of that. If I don't have an action, the form just doesn't do anything when you hit submit. It'll just sit there and do nothing, right? And that's also okay, but something else that you could have it do is you could have it return to the same page, but it still won't do anything. At least with this, you'll be able to gather information and start to understand a little bit about how the form is actually passing information into another page or another vessel or another script or whatever. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the form like this, and everything that goes inside of the form from this point on is going to go in this area right here. And the things that you would put inside of a form are going to be the input fields and labels and things like that, right? And so if I come down here, it'll give me a place to start typing. So that's the first thing that you have to have with a form, is that you have to have the form tag, all right? And everything that is part of the form goes inside of these open and close form tags. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start to put some of the input fields. All right, so, and then we're going to kind of progressively build this, and I'll kind of go backwards, and I'll explain kind of like as I start to retrofit some things. But for right now, we're just going to start with the most basic, and I'm going to start with an input. All right, and so it lets me pop that up. So input, and then an input field is going to require certain things. First of all, you have to tell it what type the input is. All right, and so we have all these different input types. Okay, and there are a whole bunch of different things here, right, that you could choose. You could choose week, URL, time, text, and so on, right? You've got a ton of different stuff, right? And so what I'm going to choose is actually down at the bottom. We're going to choose text, okay? And another thing that you have to have is you have to have a name. And when I say name, this is the part that's a little bit tricky. What the name attribute is actually going to do for an input field, or yeah, for any kind of form input, is that it's going to provide the key. And what that means is that, remember I showed you before, make this go away. Okay, I had to make that OS upgrade notification go away. Anyway, so with name, it's the key. And so anytime you're passing information from one page to another page from a form, you have the key and then you have its value. The value is going to be what the person types into this input field, but the name is actually the key. And so we have to give the key some sort of identifier. And so we're going to call this, if this is going to be where people type their names, we'll type this as full name, okay? Don't be confused by this word, name, all right? That is the attribute. I wish that it wasn't called name. I wish that it was called like key or something like that, but it's called name. And so a lot of people get that confused and they think that that's the same as the ID. It's not. They think it's the same as saying that it's a name type of text. No, it's not. It is actually the thing that is required that is going to identify what the key name is, and then the value that belongs to that key name is what somebody would type whenever they go and they start typing into this input field. Anyway, so we've got input, and then the attributes so far that we have are type, we have name, and then another one that we need to have is ID. Okay, and here's the thing. I like to call my IDs the same thing that I call the name. And so it just sometimes will keep things a lot easier and to keep straight. For you, what you're doing right now is not that complicated. Later, though, if you were to start to get into something a little bit more advanced where you actually learn how to do scripting, it really makes it a lot easier if this name attribute and the ID attribute have the same thing. Like, so I would say full name, for instance. Oops, not full name, full name. All right, so if I wanted to create something that was going to be a key name for full name, I would also maybe make it the ID. And I'm not going to go into all the reasons that it could be, that it makes it exponentially easier to deal with, but it does. I just promise you, it makes it a lot simpler if these two things are the same, if you give them the same names, okay? All right, so that would be the end of my requirements for the text input type. Now, if I save this, let's go and do a refresh and we'll take a look on our actual page. Okay, and all I need to do here is hit refresh. And you see I've got a text thing I could start typing, right? Well, the problem with this, right, is that I don't know what this is for, okay? Now, if I went back into my form, let's go back into brackets, and I were to put, you know, first and last name, like that, let's save that and let's go back and refresh it. All right, you might look at that and go, oh, well, that's all I need to do. Well, it's not. First of all, if you were to look at the way that this is, you'll notice that there's no paragraph tag. There's nothing wrapped around where it says first and last name. So it's not going to be able to receive any kind of formatting. So the first thing that I would probably do is I would wrap a paragraph tag around this entire thing. And so in brackets, an easy way to do that, if you installed the extension that I suggested earlier in the semester, you can go up here to edit and you can choose this where it says surround using the surround plugin. It's also a shortcut of shift, and on my computer it's an Apple, so it'd be command, it's probably control on Windows, but shift command J. All right, but if I do that, I can type like like that, and it automatically will put a paragraph tag around everything. And so now it means that at least this is going to be formatted in such a way. And you can put an input field inside of a paragraph tag, and that's fine. Now, you might say, okay, well now that's good, I'm done, I can move on. Well, here's the problem, is that remember how it looked whenever we didn't have this where it says first name and last name? Remember how it looked on the screen? If I come back over here to our browser, oh, actually I need to, here, let's get rid of that. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to save this, and let's go back over here and refresh. All right, remember how this looked without any words? Well, if somebody is blind or they have low vision and they use a screen reader, then this is the way they would see this. They would not know, possibly they might not know that the words first and last name went with this form field. It's really not uncommon for things to get separated and messed up whenever you start to build forms and you don't use what are referred to as labels that will specifically put identifying pieces of information with a form field so that you know what it is that you're filling out. And so the way that we do that is we actually do, here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit the return key. I'll hit the return key again so that we can see that everything that we're about to put inside of this paragraph is inside the paragraph. But we also need a thing called a label. All right, and so it's a label tag. And whenever you do label, you say label for. For is an attribute. You would say for equals, and then you're telling it which label this is for, and you say it's the label for the ID name of full name. Okay, so that's how it matches them together. All right, and then you've got this label, and then I can put my first and last name in here. In fact, I'll capitalize name. All right, so right now the way that I've got this set up, in fact, you know what I think I'm just going to move my CSS over really small because we're not really doing much with it right now. We're just setting up the HTML part. In fact, I could probably just close my CSS panel. Let's just do that and go back to full screen. So right now what I've got inside this paragraph tag is I have a label, and that label I know it's for the ID of full name because I'm using this for attribute. So that tells me if I'm using a screen reader that this information where it says first and last name, that is supposed to designate what I'm supposed to be typing into this input field. Okay, so that's very helpful. Now if I go here, hit save, let's jump back over, hit refresh. And you might think it looks the same, but it is very, very different in terms of the way a screen reader would read it. Now you've just made that form field accessible. So let's jump back over here and let's add some other stuff. So I'm going to copy this whole paragraph and we're just going to refactor some things. Okay, so in this one where it says first and last name, let's change this. The next thing that we decided that we're going to use is email. All right, and I'm going to change this. Well, let's just change this in the right order. First of all, let's take care of our input field. The type of input is not text any longer, it's email. And remember, this is the thing I was telling you about before where you might go, well, I'm still typing text into an email field. Why can't it just be text? Well, if we tell it that it's email, then that helps a browser understand if it uses auto population or autofill, then it will be able to autofill an email that you filled out in something else that used the type of email in an input. If you did type of text, then it might not know how to target this input with the proper email options because it's not the right type. Okay, so you need to make sure that if it provides for a specific type like email or telephone, that you use that specific type. So for email, I'm going to go ahead here and I'll type, make the type email. And I can also make the name email as well. That's fine, because this is something that you make up, right? Where it says name, you're making that up. Whereas the type, you don't make up. The type is something that's a predefined option for different types of inputs, but the name is something that's sort of like a variable name if you wanted to make up, like sort of like making a CSS class or an ID name. Same is true for ID, of course, because it's an ID, you can make that name up. And we decided that we're going to keep this simple and we're going to keep the name and the ID the same. That means that up here where it says label 4, I also need to make sure that that matches so that it's for the ID of email. All right, so that it'll match this label with this input for screen reading device. Okay. All right, so that's all good. All right, and now if we wanted to provide the telephone, let's copy this. In fact, what I will do so that when we're doing our copy paste stuff, I'm just going to take all these values out so that it's not confusing, right? Like that. Okay, and then I can just copy this because we're also going to need a password. I'll copy this and I'll paste it one more time down here. All right, so for this third one, we decided that it's going to be for a telephone, so we'll say for the type. And if you don't remember how to type the attribute name, you can always do this. You can say type equals, and then as soon as you start to complete this part of it, oh, it went away. It'll pop up for you is what I was going to say. And then you can kind of like scroll down through here and you can find the thing that makes the most sense. And then I'm going to go ahead and just tell you TEL stands for telephone. So that way somebody would somebody's autofill would know that that's a telephone field. And then where it says name, I'm just going to call it phone, right? I'm just going to do that. I'll copy this, and for the ID, I'm also going to call it phone. And for the for attribute up here, I'm going to call it phone because it needs to match this ID of phone. Okay, so it's up to you if you want everything to just be TEL, but this also helps you understand that the type right here, this type attribute, it has, as I said, predefined options that you can't sort of willy-nilly make up, whereas these two, name and ID, they can be whatever you want it to be, as long as they're unique. You don't want something in the same form to have the same name. So like you wouldn't want to have phone here and then like phone up here, for instance, because that would be a problem. This does have to be unique in the form, okay, but you can make it up. It just has to be unique. Now, this last one that we talked about, that was password, and so the type is, in fact, password, right? And that's what will help the browser designate how to put bullets on the screen so that somebody can't look over your shoulder and glean your password. I'm going to say that the name is also password. It's easy. And then the ID can also be password, which also means then that the for attribute up here for the label is also password. Oh, and I forgot, I need to type up here where it says colon, I need to say password. And then right here, I need to put phone. Okay. Okay, and so let's save that and let's just take a look at what we have so far. And let's hit refresh. And you can see that I've actually got something now. And if I were to start to type in the password, you see that it types bullets, right? And in my email, if I wanted to pop this up, it gives me some different options and I could choose that. And if I choose it, it'll autofill everything. So if I wanted to fill that, then it'll fill my work phone number. All right, so that's fine. And then I could put a new password. And I don't have a submit button, so I can't even submit. But even if I did submit, it wouldn't do anything. Well, actually, it would go to that form execution page that I showed you. So let's go back over to our form. All right, and we can keep putting more stuff in there. And if you remember, one of the other things that we had is we had a section of radio buttons, and if you want to jump back over, we can take a look here at our information. So we have, and in fact, what I might even do so that there's no formatting that comes from this, I'm going to turn this into a plain text file, and I'll get rid of all my formatting, but that's okay. So for age requirement, I've got these questions, right? Or I've got this question right here. Actually, it's not a question, that's a comment. It's saying you have to be 18 or older to sign up as a volunteer. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to copy all of these things. I'll just copy them and we'll just jump back over here. And I'm just going to paste them in here for just a moment. So the first thing I want to do is maybe for this first one, I'll put a paragraph tag around it. So it was Command-Shift-J. We'll do a paragraph tag. Okay, and then these other ones are also going to be paragraphs as well, and you could decide how you wanted to group these things. Maybe what we would do is we'd put around all of these a paragraph tag. So let's do one paragraph like that, but at the end of each one we can put a break tag, for instance. Okay, and we'll do another break tag here. All right, and so, and I'm also gonna, just to keep it consistent, I'll tab all of this in so it's, oops, so that it's at least in the right place. Okay, and there we go. Okay, so, and then if I want, I'll just make it really consistent so that I can see that this is all inside of a paragraph. All right, so now these need to become radio buttons, right? These need to become options. And so to do that, it's also an input type. But traditionally, radio buttons will be the little circle before, like it would come, you know, like here, for instance, you know, like you would choose, like if this little X represented the radio button, then that would be right there. So in this case, the label would still be this, I am 18 or older, and the actual input would be where this X is. So where this X is, I'm going to put an input, and I'm just going to go ahead and close it. And by the way, you may have noticed this already, but an input is one of those things that is referred to as an empty element, or I like to refer to it as a self-closing element, in that it doesn't have an ending, it doesn't like they have an end input tag, right? So it's just self-contained. So I'll make the input right here, and the type is going to be radio, right? So the type equals, and you can scroll down if you want to choose it from this choice. So say type is radio. The name, in this case, we're talking about age, so I'll just call it age. That'll be the name of the key. In this particular case, the ID is going to be, let's say, 18. Let's say that well, we can't make an ID, by the way, we can't start it with a number. So we can say of age, and you can do dashes. So you could do like a hyphen. You could say of dash or of hyphen age. All right, that can be the ID. And then right here next to it is where we could wrap a label tag around it. And so I'm going to highlight it, and I've got my, I'm going to use my surround shortcut, which is Shift Command J, and I'm going to put label like this, and it'll wrap a label tag around. And so I need to come back in here, and I need to finish it where it says label. I need to say for equals, and then it's going to be for the ID of age. So I'll copy that and I'll just paste it right there. Okay, so that can be the way that you do your first one. All right, I'm going to actually scoot this over a little bit. Okay, so that's how we can have our first input. And then the next input is going to be right here, and like if you pretend like there's an X at the beginning of each one of these, right, you could take that where the input is and just, you know, put it there. I'm going to actually copy this input because it has a lot of what I need. All right, and I'm going to copy that, and I'm just going to paste it. I'm going to change the things that are necessary. Okay, it's still an input type of radio, and here's where it gets a little bit different, a little trickier with radio buttons. Remember up in the text input areas and the email and telephone and password inputs, I told you that the name always has to be unique, like this name right here. That is true, except for something like a radio button. If you are using any kind of input type that requires multiple options, but that requires only one choice, then in that case, you do want these all to be the same name, because you're only allowed to put one, make one choice so that it'll match that single value with the name of age, right? So it'll only let you, because it's radio type, it'll only let you choose one as long as the name is all the same. And so that's how you create what is referred to as a radio group. You don't do some other kind of thing to make a group. The way that you group them is they all have the same name. And the reason for that, again, is because you would only choose one, and then whichever one you choose, it gets the key name of age and then the value of whatever it is that is. Okay, and then, oh, and that's the other thing I didn't put here in in this other one where it says input type radio, name, age, ID of age. What I didn't put is I did not put the value, okay? And so the value can, if I want to keep the same name as the ID, I can copy this and I can put it inside of the value. And the value is something that you're telling is predefined. It means that this person is of age already, okay? And so I need to change this down here though, because in this one, that person's not yet of age. They're saying they will be 18. And so you can say, if you want to do this, you could come over here and say, will be of age, right? That could be the name of the ID, right? And it can also be the name of the value. So I'll copy that and I'll say value equals. And the value is the thing that would actually show whenever you send the form. It's actually the thing that you would get on the other end. So the input, if somebody chose this one, right? If they chose this button that says I will be 18 by the time of the event to volunteer, what you would see if you were getting the raw data that comes to you from the form, you would see age equals will be of age. And so you would know, oh, okay, this person's not quite 18, but they will be of age, right? So that's the way you could do that. All right. Now, the next thing that we still need to do is we still need to put this I will be 18 by the time of the event. We need to put this inside of a label, so we'll do the Command Shift J in brackets with my plugin, and I'll put that label tag. That okay, and then again I need to do this label for equals, and then I'm going to copy where it says will be of age. That way I don't misspell something, and I'll paste it inside the label for attribute. Okay. And then if I wanted to be really explicit so it's easy to see all of these, it's kind of gets harder to see as they start running together. That makes it a little bit easier. And then also I can drop this down. Oops, I can drop this down here too, right? So that my label is easy to see right underneath my input, and you can see that it comes right after. The other thing then I want to go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and copy this. We'll copy and we will paste this in here. And okay, type is radio still, name is still age because it's part of the same group. And then the ID is, let's call this newsletter only or something like that, right? And then I'm going to copy this ID and I'm going to make the value the same thing. Okay, and then it's going to be the same thing with the label. Let's, oops, actually let's just highlight this label or highlight the text that's going to be the label. We're going to wrap the label tag around it. Okay, and then I need to put the for attribute, and then I'm going to paste in newsletter only because it's for the ID of newsletter only. Now, earlier I also said, right, so the other thing that I kind of just contradicted from earlier what I said was a lot of times I like to make the name and the ID the same. Well, clearly I can't do that with radio groups. And the reason is because the IDs have to be unique, right? They do need to be unique. They can't be the same. An ID should always be unique and it should only ever be used once on the page. But in a radio group, it's important that the name is the same for each radio button so that it knows that it's part of the same grouping. Okay, so that is the one exception. There's also an exception like for a different type of input that we're not using. It's called the select option. We're not going to use that in this form demo, but it's similar where you've got lots of different options, but you're only allowed to choose one of them. Okay, so this is how you would do your radio. So let's just save this and let's see how it looks. Let's go here. We'll do a refresh on the page. And you see here I've got my paragraph, right? I've got my options where I can choose one or the other because it sees these as a group because they all have the radio type and they have the same name. I know that it's only going to allow me to choose one of them, but not all of them. Okay, so this is a good stopping place for this video, and we're going to continue the demo in the next video, moving on to checkboxes.